Genesis HMAS deconstruction engine online.
When a Brazilian football club hits a financial wall, the public reaction is immediate and predictable. The fans, the press, the sponsors, they all demand total transparency. The executives in charge always deploy the exact same defense mechanism. They step to the microphone and promise to commission a full, independent external audit. The supporters inevitably celebrate this announcement. They assume an audit is a forensic bloodhound, a tool designed to tear through the books, expose the off-balance sheet deals, and uncover the rot that caused the crisis. But Tier 1 firms, the Big Four, virtually never accept statutory audit engagements for Brazilian sports entities, and the smaller firms that do step in rarely find the deep-seated corruption the fans expect. In this context, the announcement of an audit functions as a tactical delay. It provides the legal cover a board needs to survive the immediate crisis, buying time while the public waits for a report that is unlikely to address their primary suspicions. This delay is effective because institutional capital and the general public rarely distinguish between different levels of financial scrutiny. A statutory external audit is strictly a compliance exercise. It looks backward at historical financial statements, relying on sample testing to ensure the numbers align with standard accounting principles. This chart illustrates the materiality threshold, the legal concept governing these reviews. Audits catch broad errors influencing major decisions. They don't proactively hunt systemic fraud. If a multi-million-dollar extraction operation sits below these thresholds or off the books, the audit passes right over it. The board then takes this clean or lightly qualified opinion and presents it to the media as definitive proof of their innocence. By labeling this routine financial review an audit, the executives legally fulfill their public promise while avoiding the forensic investigation required to expose their operations. The standard statutory audit provides a compliance checkbox. It satisfies the letter of the law while leaving the underlying threats entirely unexamined. To stop falling for this narrative, institutional capital must map financial interventions across 4 distinct vectors. The mandatory external audit sits strictly in the backward-looking compliance quadrant. Consultancy and advisory services move into the forward-looking space. They help build future strategy and optimize operations, but they inherently assume a baseline of management integrity. Due diligence provides transactional protection. It looks forward to detect threats before capital is deployed, identifying hidden sporting liabilities and tax traps that standard audits ignore. Finally, we have the forensic investigation. This is the actual tool required to reactively hunt down fund diversion, executive misconduct, and related party fraud. The bait-and-switch operation relies on these definitions. The public demands an intervention from the threat detection quadrants, but the board purchases a product from the compliance quadrants. This intentional mismatch between the service purchased and the threat identified provides the mathematical shield required for continued capital extraction. This brings us to a secondary, equally distracting demand from fans and the media, the obsessive quest to pin down the club's exact total debt to a single static number. Brazilian club finances cannot be captured in a single snapshot. They are a complex, shifting web of short-term liabilities, long-term arena financing deals, and highly variable contingent provisions for ongoing lawsuits. Attempting a one-time, exhaustive survey to map every invoice, contract, and penalty across 5 to 10 years of history is a practically flawed, Herculean task. These clubs operate in a state of chronic deficit. Interest accrues daily. New labor claims arrive weekly. Every player signing or unpaid supplier shift the debt profile in real time. Executing this kind of forensic mapping takes upwards of 6 months and costs hundreds of thousands of reais. By the time the final report is delivered, the numbers no longer reflect the reality of the club. A solvent institution doesn't rely on expensive vanity reports. It implements continuous, dynamic debt management, sets aside realistic provisions, and enforces rigorous cost controls. Fixating on a perfect snapshot of the debt pile distracts everyone from the structural reforms actually required to break the cycle of insolvency. When pressed to hire a Big Four firm, club presidents frequently claim they need time to tidy up the documents before an audit can begin. External auditors do not grade the aesthetics of an archive room. Their mandate is to test internal controls and extract sufficient evidence to form an opinion. This excuse creates a logical paradox. If the club's records were truly too chaotic to audit, the smaller firms they employed in previous years would have been forced to flag severe scope limitations in their reports. The disorganized archive is simply a stall tactic. A compromised administration has no incentive to voluntarily organize evidence that could directly incriminate them or their political allies. They deploy this excuse perfectly in sync with the club's election cycles, promising transparency on the campaign trail, followed by immediate institutional amnesia once they secure power. The public pledge to prepare for a real audit is a public relations delay tactic. It weaponizes the club's own amateurism to protect the status quo. What happens when a troubled sports club tries entering the front doors of a Tier 1 firm? Following the Enron collapse, the client acceptance phase evolved into a high-stakes diagnostic gauntlet designed to prevent systemic contagion. The process begins with a reputation scan. The auditors analyze the entity's history, uncovering a saturation of active litigation, tax noncompliance, and a chronic track record of defaulting on agreements. Next is the human element check. Investigators map the internal architecture and frequently find individuals with criminal anomalies embedded directly within the board of directors. This triggers what the firm calls association risk, the danger of their trusted brand being caught in the gravity well of a club's toxic mismanagement is too high to justify the contract. The system responds by protecting its own ecosystem. The firm officially issues a hard rejection, prioritizing its own structural integrity. The inherent toxicity within these clubs triggers a Tier 1 firm's systemic immune response, blocking the engagement before it ever reaches the audit phase. Rejection from a major audit firm is a symptom of skipping the necessary sequence of operations. To achieve true audit readiness, a club must first submit to aggressive consulting, exhaustive due diligence, and targeted forensic investigation. These advisory services serve as foundational building blocks. They identify hidden liabilities, excise operational leaks, and stabilize the business structure from the ground up. Institutional capital and club supporters must stop demanding a magical, one-off audit to cure decades of systemic rot. True solvency requires a sequential process of forensic structural reform. You must stabilize the entity completely before an external audit becomes mathematically and legally possible.